call from Julie Quadros Perry that the senior class had invited me to be at this event this morning. I was really thrilled. Coming here last November to speak to all of you and kind of tell you about what it was like here in the Stone Ages right after militarization ended was a really big thrill for me. And meeting the students especially, their questions were amazing. One of the things that happened that day when I was here in November is that I was asked what house I would join if I were to choose. And it was interesting. I had to stop for a second because in my mind, I was thinking between Withington and Theodore. I was in Mrs. Theodore's first 6th grade class, and I was her teacher's pet, I will admit it, and sat right up against her desk, and I thought, I really loved Mrs. Theodore, but there was no question in my mind that I had to choose Withington. And the reason for that is Ted Withington. I believe that I'm here because of Mr. Withington, and I think all of you are as well. And if you don't know his history, there is a wonderful article that he wrote himself. I'm not actually sure when he wrote, but it appeared in a 2004 Academy, in the Academy newsletter. And I reread it again in preparation for this. And one of the things that was so extraordinary about Mr. Withington is he helped bring the school out of what I think was at that time kind of a dark period. And it was still fairly dark when I came here as well. It was very, very military, even though all of the uniforms were gone, and there were girls here, at least a few of us. But it was a very intense atmosphere, but the vision was so strong. There were members on the board of trustees that really felt that this school had tremendous potential for change if they were just willing to make the change. But at that time, girls were considered to be sort of the alien beings here, but this was very much an all-white, very, very conservative place. And I learned a lot about life by being here. The thing about Mr. Withington is that he was a visionary in his time, a World War II bomber pilot and an educator, but he had grown up in Hawaii. And I think that gave him a certain understanding that the world is a bigger and much more complicated place. And maybe Morgan Park Academy could really benefit from that, seeing the world that way. And I think that I look at all of your faces this morning. It's such a thrill to me. I wish so much that he could see where MPA has come, because this is exactly, I think, what his vision was. And when we all first started out here and tried to struggle through the transition, I think that in his mind, this is what he saw. Sue Withington was my best friend in 6th grade. I spent a lot of time on this campus because her house was just off the parking lot behind Hanson Hall. So it's painted light blue right now, and it's kind of a big square with a porch on the front of it. And so we used to play college girls here. We always had a vision that this was a college campus and where we were headed. And when you look around, it kind of does feel that way a little bit. So when you get to college, there will be something about it that will be a little bit familiar. So anyway, I digress. I want to tell you some of the parents and faculty who didn't get to hear my speech what it was like to be here. Starting in 1959, this campus still had artillery on the campus. There were no girls' bathrooms. There was no girls' locker room. We had two women teachers who would stand guard for us so that we could run in and use the bathroom and run out again before the boys went in again. And it was a very intense culture here. And that's one of the things that I notice most about how things have changed, is that the bullying and the intensity of sort of this, not merely a male culture, but a highly militarized, punishing kind of culture was here. And I think that that was the thing that really taught me how to live in sort of a dangerous man's world. One of the questions that was asked to me by some of the students was, what was it like to be in that kind of environment? How did you stand up? And I said, well, the worst part of it is your first reaction is to become a bully yourself and to start trying to stake out your territory and build up your defenses and put up your own walls. And then I realized that wasn't really helping me or anyone else. When I finally realized in high school that I had kind of taken on some of those defenses in order to survive, I realized that that's the worst thing you can do, because that means that you have taken on the characteristics of your oppressor. And the most important thing is, in order to understand how to live in the world as a unique human being, which I believe you all are, you have to believe in yourself first and foremost, and you have to understand that what other people think about you is their way of controlling you. And when you can only understand who you are and who you want to be and how you want to reach out, you can never be controlled by anyone else. You can always make your own way. You can always figure out who you want to be and where you want to go. And no one can stop you. And I know you'll hear this is a typical sort of graduation message, but I believe that all of you are here because you are unique. If you were like everyone else, you probably wouldn't have come here in the first place. I know that's certainly true of myself. I have no idea why my mother thought it was a good idea to come to an all-boys school at age 8. I have no idea. I'm pretty sure she didn't tell me that's what was going to happen. On my first day when I walked up to school, she let me out of the car. East Hall was the elementary school. It doesn't exist anymore. It was across 112th Street, next to the gymnasium. And in front of that school was the entire student body of boys, from 3rd through 12th grade, and they all turned at once and looked at me. And I froze. I did. I really didn't know what to do. But I realized that between me and my future, that door that I had to go were an awful lot of scary people. A lot of people I didn't know, and a lot of people I needed to somehow or another get through. And I realized that my mother needed to take my hand to help me to do that, but it was the kind of experience that you'll have even perhaps when you first get to college, where you're surrounded by people who might judge you. You're surrounded by people who might not even like you. But you don't really have to worry if you know who you are and what you want to accomplish. And at the same time, you have to open your heart and not be afraid of people and not dislike them for who they are and what they're trying to do. Because if they're trying to oppress you, it's because they're afraid of you. Always keep that in mind. I think that the number one thing that I learned about being the first girl at the academy was that they really saw me as an agent of change. And as a result, I was really going to be held back, if at all possible. And even the teachers were bullying at times in that regard. And they really wanted you to feel as uncomfortable as possible. I'm sure everyone in this room has experienced that at one time or another. And all I can say is that is not something you should ever get into at any cost. And the other thing that really happened to me while I was here at the Academy, from 1959 to 1968, if you look back, that's probably the most tumultuous decade in U.S. history, at least in recent history. And to be here in this room, just about where the coffee table is where I was sitting when the bell rang. It's still there on the wall. And they announced to us, we were just finishing lunch, that the president had been shot. I was in 8th grade. And there was a murmur in the room. Overwhelmingly, we were all children of Republicans at that time. And there was some nasty remarks that were made and so on, like, about time or whatever. I don't think any of us really felt that. We didn't really know what we were talking about. But our classes were canceled. We went to class, but nobody actually did anything. Radios were turned on in all the classrooms in Hanson Hall and West Hall, which is where the high school was at the time. I went to gym class over in the gymnasium. We sat in the locker room with the radio on and listened as they told us about Kennedy being shot and dying. And when the word came that he was actually dead, my whole world kind of flipped around. I never dreamed that anything so horrible could happen. And I, along with my friends, we started crying. And for an 8th grade person to suddenly have world politics and violence sort of enter your life. It is something you can't even explain to anyone. I think that was the beginning of my understanding that that this was going to be a really different decade. And even when the Beatles came along a month later on a television show, it felt good, but not quite as good as it might have otherwise. In 1968, when I graduated here, that was, of course, even more tumultuous. We were deep into the Vietnam War, and when Martin Luther King was assassinated, this whole area just kind of hunkered down. People were afraid. I remember I lived in the house just over on Voltaire Avenue, and there were helicopters circling over the trees. You could see them. And I was like, why? Well, at that time, the African Americans lived on the other side of the tracks. And it was somebody's idea that there was going to be trouble. Well, of course there was no trouble. We were all the same. I had gone to Esmond School, which is real close to, well, it's just down the hill from here, before I came to the academy. And all of the people in this area, in Beverly, Morgan Park, we were all in it together. This was actually more of a community than people realized. But when we saw helicopters and so on, they were trying to sort of mark us as something a little bit different, maybe. I'm not sure. But those kinds of things intruding in your life when you're a young person really do change you. And then, of course, when Robert Kennedy was assassinated, that was the day before my prom. It took the edge off the celebration for us at the time. And when you see all of that happening, it's a tough thing. But one of the things that was occurring at the same time was there was a lot of discussion here about when was the school finally going to break down the last wall and invite people in of color. I believe we had a couple of Asian children in the elementary school, but that was as far as the school would go. And I could tell the story, I don't have the time this morning, I did tell it a little bit more last November. But my belief is that struggle that happened here at the Academy was the most important thing that happened while I was here. The students and teachers were really, really pushing hard against the trustees who really weren't ready for that change. They'd just gone through the change from military to prep school, from boys to co-ed, and they just weren't ready for the change, and it was an ugly time of struggle. Mr. Withington left in 1966 because the struggle was overwhelming. He had a vision, but he couldn't bring everyone along as fast as he had hoped. And it was a sad thing that he left, because I really missed him. A lot of us did. And what I would say is that when in 1968, finally, after a lot of teachers left, after I graduated, and they finally said, okay, we've got to make this change, it's time. In 1968, finally, the doors opened, and we started on the path to where we are today. And I look at this place, and I know, without a question, that this is Ted Withington's vision. And I'm so proud of all of you. It's so emotional for me to see this in this place that looks so much the way it used to, and to see how beautiful it is now, how much more beautiful it is now. So what I want to say, it's like Ted Withington, if you have a vision, whatever it is, for yourself, for the world, for your community, for your family, believe in yourself. It's the most important thing. And don't be held back ever by what other people think or say or want to do to you. Because if you don't believe that you can be oppressed, you never will be. And I really wish you all wonderful success, joy, happiness, and I'm so thrilled to be here and to be part of wishing you that. Thank you very, very much, and have a great future.